Hello, Longhorn. This is a Texas Exes podcast introducing you to Longhorn entrepreneurs and business leaders. I'm Sarah Light, and today our guest is Bianca Rhodes. She is the CEO of Knight Aerospace. She got her BBA from the University of Texas in McCombs in 1981. She did banking, and now she's in aerospace. So they are building medical modules that roll onto a cargo plane. This is an awesome story. Thanks for listening. Here's Bianca Rhodes. Well, thank you for driving in from San Antonio.
Absolutely.
I know we have a lot of Longhorns in San Antonio.
Yes.
But that's not where you're from.
No, I'm from the Valley originally.
Okay, where in the Valley?
Weslaco.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why did you choose UT?
You know, I think since I was born,
Okay.
like I remember the Longhorn football. I'm a big football fan, but I remember watching football games, Longhorn games, and just assuming from the earliest age that this is where I was going to school.
Yeah. And did you have family that had any association?
I'm like the first person in my family to be college educated. Mm-hmm. My parents were not educated. I really globbed onto some of my friends and their families and some of their older siblings. But even my friends, none of their older siblings had gone to Texas.
So
it was just like, this is what I'm going to do.
You were like a pioneer coming here to Austin.
Oh, yeah. It was a big thing. From a cultural standpoint, it was a huge thing for me to leave the family, move to Austin. That was a very, very big thing.
And so you came and you were in McCombs. It wasn't McCombs at the time, but
Right.
you were in the business school. And
Right.
were you just always, did you pick business?
Yeah, so I picked business because I grew up dirt poor, and I looked around my town, and the people that were making any money and that were successful were business people, and specifically bankers. And I was really good in math. I loved math, and I loved school. I loved learning. So I thought that sounds interesting. So I decided finance.
Yeah, sure.
Super naive.
Money.
I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I had never been inside a bank. It's really hysterical. But yeah, that seemed to make sense for me.
And where'd you live freshman year?
So freshman year, I did not come to Texas my freshman year. So this is like a pathetic story. But my counselor, when I was graduating, said, "So what do you think you're going to do?" And I said, first time I had ever met this person, I said, "Well, I want to go to Texas." And she said, "Oh, honey, you should not go to Texas. The kids that go to Texas are from like Houston and Dallas, and they're really smart. You should go to Texas State." And I was like totally intimidated. And I said, "Okay." And I was number 4 in my class because I was a cheerleader, which brought my grade point average down. I mean, I could have gone whatever. But so I went to Texas State. I made a 4.0. I didn't even buy books the second semester. I said, "I am out of here." I don't get that, whatever she was talking about.
I hate that when
I know.
somebody discourages you.
I know.
Why not say,
know.
you can do it? You just have to do this, this, and this.
Yeah. I just thank God that I was smart enough to go, okay, that was wrong, and I'm going to make a switch, and I didn't stay.
And brave enough.
Right.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah, because then it was like move, and I had to talk one of my roommates into moving with me and transferring, and it was just, a mess.
And so did you live in a dorm at all while you were here?
I did not.
Okay. So you lived in an apartment.
Right.
And then what did you do while you were on campus? Any student groups?
I did not. I mean, I had that kind of college experience where I worked full time.
Okay.
So I did very little on campus.
Where did you work?
I worked at a savings and loan association at the time.
Okay.
It's called University Savings, and I worked downtown, and then they moved me out to a branch out on like past 2222 and Olin Road. So I mean, I was all over the place.
Yeah. I used to go to Olin Road because one of my best friends, who was also from the Valley, lived off Olin Road in college. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, it's so north.
My gosh, yeah.
And now it's so close.
It was out in the country, basically. Yeah.
Why do you live so far?
Right.
Okay. And so when you graduated, did you just think, okay, I'm going to go work at a bank?
Yeah, so I interviewed, I worked full time, so I didn't have that much time to interview. So when I was a senior, I decided who I wanted to interview with, and I thought banking was the right way to go because I didn't really understand a lot of industries. I still was pretty naive from a business standpoint, but I thought banking and lending would be the way to learn industry because you would be exposed to a lot of different industries. So I interviewed a bank in Dallas and one in Houston and the bank in San Antonio. And I thought, I just don't know if I want to move to Dallas or Houston quite yet. And I had stayed on with University Savings. They had offered me a job And I thought I wanted to stay in Austin and in that position. And I quickly realized that it was not going to be my career. It was more like training.
Okay.
And I thought, I really want to be on the finance side and on the lending side. And the Bank of San Antonio that I had interviewed came back about that time, and they had said, we understand you turned us down, but we'd like for you to reconsider. And it was right when I had misgivings about staying in Austin. And I said, well, I made this commitment, and I told them I'd finish writing these materials. And they said, we will accommodate you. You can start in August. And it turned out to be this great thing. And I love San Antonio.
Yeah, it's a cool town.
Yeah, it's been a great place to live.
And so what I really like about your story is that you worked in this banking world, and then you were a CFO, and you did that until your mid-30s.
Yep.
And that was your path. And then you stopped.
Right.
To raise your children.
Yeah.
And now, and I'm sure there's 100% parallels between what you're doing now and what you were doing before, but you kind of did this whole different thing.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So you were in the banking world, the CFO world,
Yeah.
and then you decided to take a step back. Was that a big deal?
It was a huge deal. I had been going really hard.
Because you were rising the ranks. You were a CFO.
Yeah. I went to work for one of my clients. We sold the company to a big publicly traded company. They hired me to be their CFO. It was an amazing story because I worked for like Gordon Gekko, like really who the movie was styled after. They were filming the movie while I was working for him. And then I went to work for another one of my bank customers that I had taken public and was now in trouble and wanted a turnaround. And so, and I did the turnaround and took them back private. And so at 34, I found myself, I'd been the CFO of 2 publicly traded companies.
Wow.
And I had been going hard, traveling a lot. And I also had 3 little children, 1, 4, and 7. So I was able to retire. I thought, this is great. Who gets to be this fortunate? And I thought, I'll raise my kids. But that lasted about 10 minutes before I knew it was not like the best idea for me. So I started consulting right away. Okay. Leaving the how hard I was working was really hard. That first year was the hardest year probably of my career.
The shift from
from working high impact, traveling, doing a lot of stuff, interacting with a lot of people, because that turnaround, we had designed it to last about 7 years, and I got it done in 3.5 years. So It was super fast. I traveled a lot, did 2 secondary offerings. It was just a lot, compacted in 3.5 years.
Okay, so then you're at home, 3 kids, something totally different.
Right.
You're not flying, so you decide that you're going to start your own consulting.
Yeah, consulting.
And that's just to kind of dip your toes in so that you have
I thought, well, it'll be fun. It'll keep my toe in the water, and it'll be, but that took a long time to figure out too, because then I found myself not doing a good job of either one. And I mean, this is the days of pantyhose and May, and I would get home and I'd go, okay, I've got to switch out of, casual clothes, which by the way, I had to buy because I didn't own any, and then put on the pantyhose and the suit and go work for a client and come back and do, undo it. And it was like so strange for a while. It took me a long time to find that equilibrium.
Yeah, okay, so going back, you graduated in the early 80s, 1981, and you're retiring at the age of 34,
right.
and you have nobody that's really charted your path like this way in your family.
Right.
And I don't think at the time that we were talking about women CFOs.
No.
Killing it.
No.
I mean, who were you even looking to at that time as
men?
Okay.
It's terrible to say, but I didn't have, when I was a lender in San Antonio, there was one other female lender in San Antonio. And I was the only Hispanic. I was just constantly the only one of whatever. But I was really fortunate. Some of my best friends and bank clients, are still my best friends. Bank clients, Texas Exes, took me under their wing, mentored me, and were able to give me great advice. And I was super blessed, and I am super blessed to have great people along the path who helped me. And there were a few women along the way, but they were not doing what I was doing. It was a very different thing. They might have been older. They might have been, not raising young children.
Yeah.
So it was a different thing.
What were you really good at that time? What was your superpower?
I think really it was simplifying things.
Okay.
I would take complicated things and I would be able to explain them to somebody else in a very simplified way. And I didn't overthink problems. I just found quick solutions and said, like, I'm not going to overthink this. The answer is real obvious. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was just willing to go with stuff, you
I
know.
love that.
And I was fortunate that it worked out okay.
All right. So you're building your consulting business and you come across this company.
Yep.
It was, at the time, it was Knight Aerospace.
It was Knight Aerospace Products, Inc. And
it was in San Antonio.
It was in San Antonio. And by this time, my 1-year-old was 18.
Okay.
So it had been 17 years.
Of running your own business.
Of running my own consulting business, you know, off and on over the years, depending on what my kids were doing.
What were the types of businesses you were consulting?
You know, a lot of my career was in healthcare. The last company was a medical device company.
Okay.
So I did a lot of healthcare and medical devices. Medical evacuation was something that I was interested. I helped stand up the helicopter rescue service in San Antonio. So I had an interest in that. And through that, I had met a lot of former military pilots, you know, medical flight guys. And so that was appealing to me.
Because there's a lot of that in San Antonio.
There's a lot. Military medicine is huge in San Antonio. And I had brought a friend of mine in to help close a transaction I was doing, a buy-sell in a family. And he said, I have this client, Knight Aerospace, you should meet them. And I met them and I thought, this is kind of an interesting little tiny company. I loved small business. I've been involved in bigger and medium, but I love small business. It's just my passion. And I thought, it's military, it's medicine, it's aerospace, it's manufacturing. Like, it doesn't get much cooler than that.
Yeah, I mean, just the name aerospace, as you were saying, when I first found you on LinkedIn, I was like, ooh, aerospace. I've never talked to anybody in the aerospace field before.
I know. It's so unique. And it was just this little tiny niche company, but it had all of the profile of the little tiny companies that I had been consulting with.
And what were they doing at the time?
So what they were doing, which was, not the best business model for sure, but they had these minor ground support equipment that they would build for cargo aircraft. And every 5 or 6 years, they'd build these VIP modules for like head of state.
Okay.
But every 5 or 6 years. So it was feast and famine.
Okay.
And the reason they were interested in meeting me is because this was during Ebola in 2014. And they were interested in building a medical module to evacuate patients. They had the last VIP module they had built was for the Sultan of Oman, who traveled with his physician and wanted more medical capabilities in the unit. So they said, but we don't know anything about medicine. We don't know anything about medical evacuation. Could you help us kind of do that? And I started a separate company. The founder wanted to keep the ownership intact. So I said, I'm going to start a separate company. I'll call it Knight Aerospace Medical Systems, and I will design a medical module.
Okay, so basic cargo plane, huge cargo plane. I know people can rattle off names of planes, but I just think of it as those big, huge ones that they can pull a tanker into it, right?
Oh, yeah.
They can.
Helicopters, tractors, you name it. They're huge aircraft.
It's the thing on like Mission Impossible where the guy's strapped into no one else is in it. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. And then the whole thing comes down.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. They are big, empty aircraft.
Okay.
They're intended for cargo, but every day they carry people and they carry patients. But you can imagine they're designed for cargo. So they're dirty. They don't have lighting. The vibration from the propellers is felt by, if you're in the back of a cargo, they're super loud because the engines are right there.
Yeah, we know they can't hear because in movies they're always just kind of pointing to things.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can imagine somebody who's injured or ill being transported. I mean, we take our soldiers from our hospitals in Germany and we transport them to BAMC in San Antonio that are burn patients for 16 hours on the back of a cargo aircraft.
And they're just like being wheeled in and then strapped in.
Yes.
Like on a gurney most likely, but then the gurney is...
But there's no lighting. It's dirty. It's freezing cold. They don't have any of the stuff that you would normally have. So for me, the idea of building, transforming and making a solution for that problem was so appealing to me. I thought, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, this is the United States of America.
Right.
Why would we treat our soldiers that way?
Right.
And so the idea of designing something that looked like a hospital room so that on the back of a cargo aircraft, you would feel like you're in a hospital room. And one of the issues is the people that go with the patients have to be super resilient. They have to go through all kinds of special training before they can deploy because they're used to working in hospital rooms. So I thought if we can make life easy for the caregivers, they don't have to do all that training. They could go from a hospital room into something that looks like a hospital room. We could deploy assets a lot faster and a lot more efficiently. So it was super appealing to me.
And these modules are, I mean, they're almost like, for lack of better words, like shipping containers, big shipping containers almost attached together. They're huge. And you just roll them on into that cargo
so
plane.
That's the big difference in what we do and a shipping container, because a shipping container is for cargo.
Yes.
So we build ours to the same standards the aircraft is built to.
Okay.
So it rolls on.
Okay.
It locks in with the aircraft and it performs with the aircraft. So the aircraft manufacturers have to certify our structures.
Oh, wow.
Because it does the same deflection and everything else with the aircraft. We don't chain anything down. We don't tie anything down like you would cargo, like you would a shipping container. Yeah, so we perform. So we always talk about we build an aircraft that goes inside of an aircraft.
Oh, wow.
We're building to that standard.
So many questions, but you said you came in during the time of Ebola, and I know that was a big shift in the company and a big reason that, you were able to help grow it. So why Ebola? Like, why was that the shift? They wanted to be able to transport patients safely without being contagious?
During Ebola, these patients were, highly hemorrhagic. So it would contaminate the aircraft. It would infect the doctors and the caregivers.
And the pilot.
And the pilots and stuff. So this became a brand new global problem that they had not experienced. So, for instance, Spain brought 3 patients from Libya back to the country of Spain with doctors, and they sat the C-130s on a tarmac trying to figure out how to disinfect them for 3 months because they had no idea. Wow. So when I first met this company and this was happening, I went to the CDC, I met with the State Department, and I said, what is the probability of this happening again, and how needed would this product be? And they said, the CDC said, it'll scare you to death. They said, we're going to have a pandemic at some point. We just don't know when and how widespread it'll be and how global and how infectious, but we totally expect that there will be some big epidemic that will require this type of solution.
Sure. And that was 2014. And then a little less than 10 years later, boom, COVID.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so you ended up buying the whole company.
I did.
And you are the CEO of Knight Aerospace.
Right.
And what's so cool is it's fascinating. But it's not something that I probably would just come across because I'm not interacting with it. I'll probably never see what you do, but I know how cool it is.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. And it's just fascinating. So when you took it over, what is y'all's main goal now?
Yeah. So I took it over. It was kind of in trouble. I worked out a deal with the founder.
Like you said, it was every 5 years they're building a module, and you're like, this is not a business plan.
Right. So he wanted to retire. It worked out to be great, great timing. But I thought, first of all, get out of this one every 5 years business.
Yeah.
So do something that's reoccurring. And so medical modules, I thought, made a whole lot of sense. But I also expanded to other products that supported and would go on the back of cargo aircraft that were more bread and butter, more must-have versus nice-to-have.
What's that?
Products. So different. So cargo aircraft, by definition, many of them don't have galleys or lavatories or seats. So we would make all kinds of other palletized systems and other modules that roll on and roll off.
So you can roll on some bathrooms.
You can roll on bathrooms and galleys, and now you can have people, and we can roll off seats. And we do this so fast and efficiently, and they're all safe because, remember, they're built to the same standards as the aircraft. So people are safe during the entire flight, during all phases of flight, which is huge. And then when they're finished, all the stuff rolls off in minutes, and the aircraft is ready to go run another mission. And so that's magic. So we build all kinds of other structures that support cargo aircraft. And since then, we have built other structures. So we have a structure that we built for rockets that we just tested at Cape Canaveral. So, we're just really, our expertise is in building structures for unconventional platforms where people or patients will have to be treated.
What does that mean that you built something for a rocket? Like
Yeah.
what kind of rocket?
Right. Well, right now it's suborbital because
Okay.
now we've discovered that we can send a rocket anywhere around the globe in like an hour. So think
Okay.
about natural disasters or humanitarian relief or any other type of emergency situation where you've got to get supplies there fast. Well, now we can do that suborbitally on rockets, but they needed the containers that would take all the stuff that needed. So they came to us.
And who's they?
The U.S.
The
government,
U.S. government.
Space Force came to us
Okay.
and said, we think you're probably the best experts in these kinds of structures, and we need a structure that will fit on a rocket, and we need you to be the go-between the rocket launchers, the rocket providers, and the constituent companies that are going to need to put stuff in the rocket. So we need you to build that structure that interfaces with the rocket, accepts equipment, and gets somewhere across the world.
And so is this happening? Or
This
are
is
you
happening.
still
We
in,
just
like,
tested the
okay.
first unit. We have the only unit that's ever been tested. We tested it for a week at Cape Canaveral on a mock-up of SpaceX's rocket.
Yeah.
And so that's now we're working on next generation's changes that we want to make to them. And we're working on reentry. So it's not just suborbitally, but now it's going to the moon or Mars and coming back into the atmosphere.
I think, is it wild to you that you said at the beginning that you came to college not knowing what you were going to do? You just said
Right.
business. You're not a doctor. I read an article where it said,
Right.
you're not
Or
a
an
doctor.
engineer.
You're not an engineer. You didn't do any of that.
No.
And you're doing stuff for Space Force.
I know.
Like, could you ever have imagined?
No, not in a million years.
It feels so not tangible. Like when
It
you were sitting
does.
in the valley and someone said, one day you're going to build stuff for space. How does one get from here to here?
I have no idea except by the grace of God, really, because it's been such an amazing journey. Even going back to work, I thought, this sounds super fun. And, when you hit one out of the park, like I did at KCI, you always wonder, could I do that again? Would it be fun? I had consulted with all these little businesses and I thought, it might be really fun to CEO something. I didn't need to do it. I thought, but if I could find purpose and have a project that would be that meaningful and that transformative
Yeah.
to humanity, how fun would that be?
Yeah.
But never even then did I think, this is 11 years ago, and I didn't think I'd be here that long. I didn't think I'd be doing this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just all been just amazing.
But you had proven yourself, and then you had the space to say, let's go find something
Sure.
fun and work in space.
Sure. But I haven't done it alone. I mean,
Sure.
I've been very fortunate. I've been surrounded by great people. That's one of the things that makes it all fun is when you find people that are like-minded and as passionate about
Yeah.
the things that we have a small business. And so everybody there is super important, really matters. Like one of the first things I do every morning is to say who's not going to be at work that day, because like we're a family and it takes every one of us to get the job done. And so, we're just really fortunate to have a terrific team.
One of the things I thought was really interesting to really put this also into perspective is the fact that if you were, helicoptering somebody out, the cost per trip of a helicopter,
yeah.
which only allows you to send one patient versus a cargo plane where you can fit how many patients?
Well, that's amazing. That's an amazingly good question, because that is a data point that we use all the time.
Yeah.
During COVID, for instance, they were taking people from New York City into outlying hospitals, one at a time on a helicopter.
And that's like, I read $30,000 a trip.
It's
Easy.
$30,000.
Yeah.
But if you take a cargo aircraft, you could take 20 people, and it's the same cost about.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And it's amazingly efficient. And it protects the aircraft, and it protects the air crew, and it protects the medical crew from the infected patients.
Yeah, because you don't even think about that. Like when people were helicoptering, the risk at the time, or the unknown risk,
Sure.
or just the unknown
Right.
of carrying a patient.
And you're right. At the time, nobody really knew. They thought, it was being spread by surface contamination and all the, it was just this big unknown.
Yeah, and you could just pop in a module. So how long does a module take to make?
Well, it depends. Some of them are really, really elaborate, but the aeromedical biocontainment module, that the first one we built for COVID, we delivered to Canada in 7 months, which was really fast.
Okay, so let's talk about this. You're in 34 countries.
Yep.
And
37.
37 now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So the company, when you bought it, really did a lot of international business.
Yes.
This is not just the United States. In
Right.
fact, are we slower adopters than some of the other countries?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was one, you asked me what were the big goals.
Yeah.
Another big goal was the United States government needs to be our biggest customer.
Yeah.
Like they have the most cargo aircraft, they have the most money, they do the most stuff around the world. U.S. Transcom is responsible for the worldwide movement of equipment and people. So they are more active than any other country by a long shot. And so, yeah, it was moving. But that's not easy because you're right. Like the United States is not the leader many times that it used to be in new technologies. And so it's taken a while, but we're making those inroads. The other thing I realized was doing business with individual countries is very difficult. Like and every one of them is different, and you're dealing with different ways of paying, because they're all military. It's the military structure. It is the approval process, the certification process, their standards. Every country is so different. So one of the things that we decided is we need to move so that we're doing business with some of the big defense contractors, the big primes, or the manufacturers of aircraft. And they can bring us into their customers, and they all understand that a whole lot easier. And so Embraer, for instance, has a brand new cargo aircraft, the C-390.
Where is that out of?
That's out of Brazil.
Okay.
And it's a brand new cargo aircraft. They've been, for 5 years, they were qualifying who the preferred provider would be for their aircraft. And we've just been named that. So we're negotiating with them, and they're bringing us into all the countries they're selling their aircraft to.
Oh, that's cool.
So we're in the final throes of several countries' negotiations. As they're receiving their aircraft, they will receive the entire system they need to operate that aircraft.
Oh, that's
medical
so
modules,
cool.
palletized systems, seating, galleys, lavatories, ground support equipment. So it makes my life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, versus you calling a country. It's like, who do you even call?
Right.
Oh, all right, I need to call somebody in this country. Who do I call?
Right.
What are the customs? What's polite? What's not polite?
No question.
How do they do business?
So complicated.
So complicated.
Yeah.
And I know you do also VIP stuff.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, why is a VIP needing a cargo plane? And what does that, you is it just for medical purposes?
No. In fact, the VIP modules that we've built so far have not been for VIPs. So, for instance, we have one flying in the United States.
Okay.
We built it more than 25 years ago, but it is intended for whoever is flying on the back of that cargo aircraft to be incognito. So you don't know when you see a bunch of cargo aircraft that there is a VIP or a DV in that cargo aircraft. They have full communications capabilities. They can sleep, they can shower, they can do all that stuff. They can communicate with anybody in the world, but they're on the back of cargo.
And they're in
aircraft.
your module.
And they're in our module.
Why would they want a cargo plane instead of just a...
Because everybody knows the other aircraft that are carrying DVs. Sometimes you have to be incognito. In the case of the last VIP that Knight Aerospace had done, it was the Sultan of Oman. So he wanted to visit the tribes across the desert and had to land on unimproved runways. So the C-130 is a great aircraft for landing in the sand.
Yeah.
And so he needed a cargo aircraft so he could go visit the tribes, but he wanted to travel with his physician, his staff, in luxury.
This is wild.
It is.
Like, wild. This is the best part about this podcast is like...
Yeah. I have no idea this world exists.
No. And when you come to, I think that's why we want to do this, is because when I was a student here, half the battle is just knowing even what types of jobs are out
Of course.
there. And like, how cool that you get to work with customers around the world and you get to help people.
Right.
And then you also get to do these VIP things.
Right.
That's cool.
It is.
So,
very cool.
Like y'all, who is your main customer? Is there a country that's like your biggest customer?
We do a lot of business with Canada.
Okay.
We do a lot of business with Australia, but we do a lot of business in the Middle East. And now we're doing a lot of business with the U.S. government.
That's so exciting. So what's next for y'all?
Well, I think space is a big new frontier. We're trying to figure it out. In fact, I had a subject matter expert in my office yesterday asking him to look at our space program and help me craft the strategy because nobody really knows
Yeah.
what is happening in space. Like it's all being, it's all happening in real time.
I guess that's an interesting question is you really have to rely on subject matter experts
I do.
because you're a CEO.
Right.
So you know how to lead and you said you can
Right.
simplify things.
Right.
But you can't, as you said, do it alone
Right. Exactly.
because you're not building these things.
Exactly. Right,
You
right.
probably don't even know, you probably know now some of the questions to
Right.
ask, but when you began, you probably were like, whoa,
Exactly.
I have to learn this.
Exactly. So I have to rely on experts in government contracting, in space, in logistics. All kinds of. We've had all kinds of people that have come in. I have former surgeon generals of the Air Force advising me. I have the former 4-star Transcom commander advising me. I rely on much smarter people than I am in their areas to help us get it all done.
And why didn't that scare you at all? Like, when you first started and you're going into something maybe you just don't know much about, you don't know sometimes the questions to ask because you don't know until you know.
Exactly.
How
you
did
have
you
to
just-
be a great listener.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to just let them, you have to tell them what you're doing and be able to articulate your problems and let them just, analyze it and talk to you. And you have to be asking a lot of questions all of the time.
Yeah. I love this.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to ask a couple fun questions just about your time at UT. Do you have a favorite memory, by the way, from your time at UT?
It was all a blur. It really was. But I had such great aha moments where I'm sitting in a class and the professor, comes in and he's your marketing professor, but then he describes how he wrote the whole campaign for Coca-Cola. And you're just like sitting there, this, young, very naive person, just floored by the fact that you're in an auditorium with all of these kids listening to somebody of that stature describe their personal experience. And I had so many of those moments where I was just blown away by the talent that was at the university.
What was your favorite place to go grab food on campus or near campus?
Near campus, probably, and I'm embarrassed to tell you that it was probably the Waffle House because that was largely responsible for my college weight gain. That was like the 2:00 go-to.
Was it the one off 290, like by the
No,
airport?
it was at like Lamar.
Oh, there was a Waffle House there at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, Waffle House is pretty good.
Yeah,
it was open.
especially at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
They're really good. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite class or a favorite professor?
I did. I loved business law. I
Okay.
was very intrigued by B law, and I loved all those classes. But I will tell you a funny story. I woke up one day to take the final for my B law final. Our professor had said, "You don't want to miss your final." Like I think there were 3 or 4 grades as per usual, and I show up and it's this auditorium, and you get the stuff passed around, and I look at this and I go, "What is happening here? Like what is?" And they said, "What? It's like insurance 405 or whatever." And I went, "Wait, what?" And the B law final had happened the previous Saturday, and I had
What?
missed it. And I had to go beg him to let me take it. And he said, "Don't you remember my saying?" And I said, "I mean, I was working full time. I was working on Saturdays. I looked at the schedule. I screwed it all up, and he let me take it."
Oh, he did. Do you think that was the right move?
He didn't give me a great grade.
Okay.
He said, "I don't care how well you do. You won't do well in the class because you should have learned, but I will let you take it because you need to finish the class."
And that lesson probably sticks with you.
Oh,
I bet
my
you double
goodness.
read everything.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm like on time for everything. You noticed I was like 30 minutes early today.
You were. I was like, she's here.
Right.
That's awesome. And what advice would you give to a freshman entering UT right now?
Yeah, don't do it the way I did. I love my experience. I certainly see the good that came out of my having to work full time while going to school full time and all that. But I certainly didn't want my kids to have to do it that way. I think you can get all that good stuff out of it in a different route. So I would say be exposed to and do as much as you possibly can. All of it is great. It's not just the learning, and I think the learning is amazing, but just the networking, the friendships, the exposure to different things, the clubs, all of that kind of stuff. My kids have been very fortunate that they've been able to experience all of it.
And what advice do you give to someone who is wanting to become a business leader, a CEO?
Yeah.
They want to be on that track.
Yeah. I think probably the key more than anything else is networking, is connecting with other people, understanding where you stop and everybody else starts, appreciating what everybody brings to the table and globbing on to the right people, and, making sure that you exercise that network and that connectivity for not just your good, but their good too, because it's a cycle, and, you will benefit from it, but they will too. And, that's probably my favorite part of my career is just the network that I've developed in 45 years in San Antonio.
And do you still have friends from UT?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah,
Do you have, random question, do you have like high government clearance because of some of the projects?
I do. And we just got our whole facility cleared, and we just signed yesterday. We got the biggest contract in our history.
Okay.
And I can't say what it is.
Yeah.
It makes me want to cry because it's so exciting, but it's a classified program. And
Whoa.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Is that like handwritten signatures of a lot of things you had to do?
It is high security, how you get stuff through the computer and where you can go. And and I have also I've just gone to a couple of major university research labs where I had to be read into what the program was without anybody else knowing what the program was.
That's
it's
the thing about
super fun.
Researching. It's like a lot of the stuff that y'all do, I probably can never know about.
Right.
So it's like,
yeah,
I know you're doing cool things out there.
Yeah.
But it's all secret.
Yep.
That's cool. What is the thing you're most proud of?
Oh, my goodness. I think just our purpose. I think probably one of the most, I love our employees, and everything that like makes a difference in their lives is super important to me. But just right alongside there is our customers. So probably one of the most meaningful days to all of us at Knight Aerospace was when we received the first letter from the Canadians saying that they had repatriated an entire severely infected COVID family back to Canada from the continent of Africa, and they knew for sure that they would not have lived had it not been for our module.
And that just means that they were able to go back to their country.
They were able to be cared for in the air on a long flight with, a lot of the issues that were happening at that time. It's not just transportation, it's actually receiving medical treatment in the air that whole time.
Did I hear or read that you're attempting to also where surgeons can do surgery?
Yep.
But that's not happening yet. But you're working towards?
We have a module that can be used as an operating room.
Whoa.
And, the fact of the matter is that our soldiers, our medical personnel will do whatever it takes to do it in the air. But most of the time, they are stabilizing patients on the ground before they can put them on an aircraft. Well, when you think about our special forces and, and really important assets that we have to extract as quickly as possible, we don't have a choice of stabilizing them on the ground. We have to treat them in the air. So us being able to improve, not just with the facility, the surrounding structure that we provide, but with new medical technologies and telemedicine stuff, you can do stuff in the air now. That's just amazing.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we had a doctor on this podcast who was a ship surgeon. He's now works at Del Med, but I mean, if you could do it on a ship, you should be able to do it on a plane.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Absolutely. This was great fun.
What a pleasure to meet you and learn about what you're doing. And
what an honor for me. When you said, did you ever imagine? Well, when I was at Texas, I would have never imagined being on the cover of McCombs or being able to do a podcast like this.
Yeah,
so this is super fun for me.
Shout out, like you're having your moment at UT right now.
Exactly.
So shout out. Also go read this fabulous photo shoot. I was like, a fabulous photo shoot of you on the cover of the McCombs magazine. So I'll link to that as well because it's a great article.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you and hook 'em horns.
Thank you so much.